Mine is pretty simple. I mean, this. I remember, you have to wait. If you have to wake up early, there's been a lot of times where you get these insane like schedules where you have to wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and you're just angry. You wake up angry. And so, one day I was like, I'm gonna change it up. Not angry when I wake up. And I literally, once I wake up, I take a deep breath and I smile. And it sounds crazy, but I've been doing that ever since. And I think you starting your day off like that is gonna have a domino effect on how you react to things throughout the day. And that is the biggest thing, is how you react to things, because you always have a choice. When we say, I can't, this is not going for me, this is not going well, anything you do is leading towards that thing. And that bad thing, or whatever, the stressful thing, the obstacles, you don't know if that's what led to it. So why not react to it in a way where it's going to be as positive as possible, and to have the best outcome that you yourself can have for it, or can contribute to it. So for me, that is as simple as that. And along with, there's the working hard, doing all that stuff. That's everyone knows that, So I think that simple thing for me really changed the way I just react to things. And I think, we're human, and we're all reactive beings. And for me, that has helped tremendously. So that's my advice for that. A lot of you might be able to relate with this. So I have two immigrant parents. Not two, one immigrant parents, and I barely speak English. And so, them coming here, obviously, this tired story of, they want you to be a doctor, they want you to be all, they want you to be just safe, And I remember when I dropped out of college, which I kind of held from them for a couple months after, and I told them, I was like, hey, I'm gonna go to LA and try and do the thing. And they're like, what thing? the thing. And they were like, well, hold up, what are you doing? And I kind of explained to them about dance. They're like, well, so I told them, I didn't even know you can make money doing it. Like, it's crazy. They'll pay you to dance. And he's just like, well, what are we talking about here? So I went back and I kind of learned as much as I could about business. I broke it down, like if I booked a commercial, how much I would make. These little things. And I came back at them and said, explained to them, like, this is the situation here. If I go on tour, if I do this is how much money I would make. And if I don't get that, I would teach dance. And this is how much money I would make. I would be okay. Let me try it out. Don't get mad at me. And don't like force me to go back to school yet. So I had this timeline of like a year to get my shit together and push myself to that extent. And for me, they saw that and they're like, oh, okay, but we'll see how long it lasts. And then we fast forward about 10, 12 years later, they're saying like, oh, it's cool. Like, Glee was a moment where if you have immigrant parents that they're like, oh, this is cool, that's nice. And then when you make it into like their language newspaper, they're like, oh my God, you made it! It's showing everyone. And they're like, and I didn't have the heartfelt moment, it's a local newspaper. But the moment when it really, almost brought, and it actually brought tears to my eyes, is I did a movie. I grew up watching, Hong Kong films, and with my family, we sat there and watched it, and we just loved it. That was a bonding where we didn't say anything to each other, but we watched it. And I worked on this movie with Michelle Yeoh and Donnie Yen, and they got to come out and meet them, and I've never seen my parents like fangirl ever in my life. And they just looked at me, and the way they looked at me, like, and I'm like, well, I didn't make it yet, but I mean, like, I'm trying, I'm still doing my thing, but the way they looked at it, I was like, they understood at that moment when I made eye contact with them, and they looked back to coming to this the situation where, you know, you're Asian American, Asian Costa Rican American, and trying to utilize those skills and express myself through movement, which is really nice. So fast forward, my parents also owned a Chinese restaurant. So all those things that that everyone, you know, when you watch like something like Fresh Off the Boat, like, that's me! Oh my God, I experienced that. But knowing all those little things, those hardships, I think it's what was really, really important about growing up in America and having parents that owned a store or a restaurant is, you know, child labor. They put me to work, and that I learned how to, you know, be resilient and also just to work hard at whatever you're doing. And, you know, the arts and something in dance and acting was something that I applied all those things like.
I had a really, I started as a dancer, and I had a really interesting, fun dance career, and I did it for about like 7 years professionally. And there was a point where I was, you know, I started acting before I started to dance, and I wanted to just act, and you know, that was a hard transition, because, you know, I would go into rooms and they'd see my resume, even though they're like, oh, you've done TV, you're dancer number 2, dancer number 3, and it's all these things where it's just like, but where's your like acting stuff? So I was in the same place where an actor would just come in and have no credits in the same way. So that was really a difficult transition for me, trying to get in the industry in a different part of the industry. And it came a time where when it was a weekend where I was in the weird headspace. My grandma just passed away, and my mom was kind of like questioning, like, well, what are you doing now? Are you dancing anymore? Are you doing any of this stuff? And she just told me that, you know, maybe you should go back to school. You know, I don't know. You want to start all over again? Is this something that you really want to do? And I had this point where I'm like, I already dropped out of college before this. I don't want to go in and possibly drop out again. But at that weekend, I got a call for an audition on a Sunday, and I was like, what? Sunday? I don't want to go to an audition. I just got out of a funeral. This is crazy. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, she did a pilot for the show, and a show called Glee. And she was like, oh, this is really cool, it's gonna be a musical. And I'm like, oh, I have to go back. Like, I love dance, but I'm like, that's the thing that I was trying to like transition out of. And so I went to the audition on Sunday, and I read some lines, and then a week later, you know, they're like, oh, you booked it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And they're like, oh, it's for a day player. And I was like, oh, this is fun, but I'm going to dance. And I was like, oh, do I have any lines? And they're like, no. But we want you to dance. And I was like, cool, okay. So I was like, that's a big win, because I didn't know what the show was. I didn't know how big it was going to be. No one knew. And at that point, before it aired, it started, you know, gaining a lot of traction. But that was like a one step into it, because we look at it as, oh, that's a big step. You're on a big show, cool. But behind the scenes is like, I am on a big show, and I'm very grateful for it. But now I also want to be able to be featured, you know, and be a part of it, contribute, and be a character. And that's what I was. And for the longest time, you know, I was a background dancer. And for me, I was like, okay, there's two ways I can go out of it. I can just be complacent and just go on, or I can try and always see what I can do to gain access to contributing more to the show. So for me, I was making up stories in the background, like trying to do stuff that would create my own story that wasn't written in the scripts. I wasn't trying to pull attention away from anybody, but at the same time, I was creating my own character, because there's no description. Mike Chang, dancer. That's all it was. Asian dancer. And then I remember Ryan Murphy came up to me and he's like, hey, I got you a line. I said, okay. And I was like, what is it? It's like, I can pop and lock. So I'm like, don't mess this up. So I'm practicing in front of the mirror, like, I can pop and lock, I can pop and lock. And do this, pop and lock. So, and I did the line, and for the whole first season, I think I had 3 lines, the whole first season. And it was an amazing experience working in the first season because I got to do some really fun numbers and being part of this awesome cast. But after that, after the first season, we went on tour. So for me, it was like, what else can I do to make them see my talents without like being like all up in their faces, because that's just not kind of how I roll. And at that time, I was working with John and Chu on LXD after we did Step Up 2. And it was cool to work on a project like that, and then also, after hours, work on LXD, which was such a passion project. And we worked on these, if you guys don't know, it's a Legion of Extraordinary Dancers, like a dance series. And then it caught on, then we started doing these really fun shows, like on the Oscars, and we went on the TED Talks, and so we did dance. And what was cool is Ryan Murphy was like, well, that's interesting. We're going on tour, and I don't want a band to open up. How about LXD opens up for us? And so he like came directly to me, and I'm like, it's not my thing, it's John's thing. So I asked John, I was like, is it cool? He's like, hell yeah, let's do it. And for me, I was like, okay, well, like let's it's such a cool thing to bring the 2 worlds together. But at that time, I also had a role on LXD where I was playing a character, and then I had a solo performance before the Glee show. So I would do the solo performance, and then do the show with the rest of the cast. But it was this one point where I walked out, and it was the first show we did, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm this background dancer on Glee, no one's gonna know who I am when I step out, but it's gonna be a fun performance, and it's gonna be great. And people recognized me and just went nuts over the character Mike Chang. And then the producers and Ryan saw that. So they're like, oh, this is interesting. They know who he is. And from then on, they upped me as a series regular. They started giving me a storyline. And for me, the story for that is, you might get that big opportunity, right? But you got to be prepared for it, and also be creative in how you push forward. I think there's this avenue. Oh, there's no one avenue. There's different avenues of like, do this, and you're going to be successful. I think that's bullshit in my mind. I think that you have to find out what works for you, what special talent that you can put forth and contribute to the story. At the end of the day, we're all trying to create stories, and you are your own authentic being. Like, people say like, oh, that's not authentic Chinese food, that's not authentic blah, blah, blah food. But I think for some people, they like to put different things in it, and that's authentic in their household. So that's the same thing as you as a person. Be authentic, and don't be afraid to show that to people, because you never know what you're going to miss. And last thing I want to say for those opportunities is there's moments where I really spoke out. There's moments where I really showcased what I could do, but there's also moments where you kind of step back and say, I'm going to be observing this so I can learn from this, and not always speak up and being that person that talks a lot, because you end up becoming that annoying person that they don't want to hire. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think be balanced, look at both sides, look at all of it, and be authentic as much as possible. This is always a very difficult question to answer for me. I remember being asked, like, what is your 10-year plan from 10 years ago? And my thing was like, I want to dance for Michael Jackson, and like, but that was 10, that obviously didn't happen, but, and so for me, it all changes. I think a year from now, it'll completely change. And for me to say what exactly I want to do, I think, is very difficult, because 5 years ago, I remember, when I worked with John on Step Up, was it 2007? 2007 was like 10. We old. Yeah. So that was 10 years ago, and in my mind, what has happened in that 10 years, I couldn't have even imagined. So I think the key for me was always to, what is this opportunity now that I have? And what can I do with it now? And from then on, then I can propel and move forward. And hopefully that'll come to, certain things will come to fruition, 5 years from now. And even John, thank you so much for those kind words. I look up to John. I remember when I first met him on Step Up 2, when he was creating all these things, I'm like, how does this guy sleep? When does he sleep? He would come and edit everything, and he would come into the rehearsals, and he was just so hands-on. I'm like, I didn't know that's what directors do. And then I go on to another project, I'm like, oh yeah, that's not what directors do. He does more than he needs to, and just because he's so passionate. And I think that is what happens when you have passion, that'll lead to those goals that you have. I think it's good when you have those goals to, whether it be an actor, director, or even having a career in finance or building a lifestyle brand. I think all those things are incredibly important, and those are like, what are you going to do to get there? What are those little things? What relationships are you going to have? What work are you going to put into it? And for me, I look at it. I would have never thought I would be in a movie like Crazy Rich Asians with Warner Brothers movie. You got to think on that aspect. For me, I just think like that's a huge thing, to be a part of. And for me to have one thing I want to say about that movie is that I came into it just kind of like the last couple weeks, and I came to play and met everyone. And the coolest thing, and going back to this where we're at right now with the Asian community, is the coolest thing was meeting this cast of Asians that came from completely different places. Because we say Asian American a lot. Obviously, LA, Hollywood, it's all here. But there's Asian British, there's Asian Australians, Asian, Singaporean, Malaysian actors, all over the place. And this movie had that. And it made me realize, like, wait, I'm there's only a couple Asian Americans in this movie. In my mind, I'm like, I'm not even full Asian American, so I can't even count myself on that. So I thought it was just so cool that once we all can really see what's out there and learn from that, and also kind of come together, I think it's such a huge thing. And never in my would I have thought that would have ever happened. And to see that how much talent is out there, I can't wait to see how much talent is here too, and for Hollywood and the media, just to actually see that. So.